The blood-red sunrise spilled across the dusty streets of Lusk, Wyoming, as Grace Richards clutched her secret treasure to her chest, a worn copy of Robinson Crusoe, hidden beneath her apron. Her split lip still throbbed from yesterday's punishment, but the 20-year-old woman refused to surrender the one thing that promised escape from her confined existence: words. It was 1878, and in this unforgiving corner of Wyoming territory, a woman's education wasn't just discouraged, it was dangerous. Grace had learned this lesson repeatedly under the heavy hand of her stepfather, Edwin Tate, who owned the town's only boarding house. His rules were simple. Women cooked, cleaned, and kept silent. Reading was for men who needed to conduct business. A woman with ideas was trouble. Grace tucked the book deeper into her hiding spot beneath the floorboards of the kitchen pantry. She had stolen moments of reading in the pre-dawn hours, sounding out words by candlelight, teaching herself with stubborn determination. Each page was a victory, each new word a treasure more valuable than gold. "Grace," her stepfather's voice boomed from upstairs. "Where's my breakfast?" She scrambled to her feet, brushing dust from her skirt. "Coming, sir." The boarding house's kitchen came alive with her practiced movements, stoking the fire, cracking eggs, slicing bread. Her mother had died 3 years ago, leaving Grace to shoulder the burden of running the establishment alongside her stepfather, who contributed little beyond criticism and threats. As she prepared breakfast for the boarders, her mind drifted to the characters in her book, to faraway shores and adventures she could only imagine. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the new arrival until his shadow fell across the kitchen doorway. "Pardon me, madam. I was told I might find some coffee." Grace startled, nearly dropping the pan of eggs. The man standing in the doorway was tall and weather-worn, with eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes marked him as a cowboy: denim pants, worn boots, and a hat held respectfully in his hands. But there was something in his gaze that seemed different from the cowboys who typically passed through Lusk. "Of course, sir. Please have a seat. Breakfast will be ready shortly," Grace managed, gesturing to the table. "Much obliged. Name's Noah Lawson," he said, settling into a chair. "Just signed on with the Double Bar Ranch outside of town." "Grace Richards," she replied, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. As she handed it to him, she noticed a book tucked in his saddlebag. Her eyes lingered a moment too long. "You like to read, Miss Richards?" Noah asked quietly. Grace froze, her heart hammering in her chest. I don't." The thundering of boots on the stairs cut her off. Edwin Tate's hulking form appeared in the doorway, his face already set in its perpetual scowl. "Girl, what's taking so long with that breakfast?" His eyes narrowed when he spotted Noah. "You pay for meals in advance, cowboy." Noah nodded respectfully. "Mr. Tate, I presume?" "I've arranged everything with Mrs. Peterson in town. I'll be boarding here for the season while I work at Double Bar." Edwin grunted, seemingly appeased by this information. "Just make sure you keep to yourself and follow house rules." His gaze shifted to Grace. "And you stop your dawdling and serve up these eggs. There's washing to be done after." Grace kept her eyes downcast as she hurried to finish breakfast preparations. She could feel Noah Lawson watching her, and something about his gaze made her cheeks flush with heat that had nothing to do with the cooking fire. The day progressed, as most did in the boarding house: endless chores, cooking, cleaning, and avoiding Edwin's temper. But Grace found herself unusually aware of the new boarder. Noah Lawson left early for the ranch but returned at dusk, covered in the honest dirt of a day's work. Unlike the other men who often spent evenings at the saloon, Noah retreated to his room after supper. 3 days passed in this fashion before Grace discovered why. It was well past midnight when she crept downstairs for her precious reading time. With a candle stub to light her way, she slipped into the kitchen pantry, retrieved her hidden book, and settled by the dying embers of the kitchen fire. It was a dark and stormy night, a voice quoted softly from the shadows. Grace gasped, nearly dropping her candle. Noah stepped into the dim light, a gentle smile on his face. "I didn't mean to frighten you," he said, holding up his own book. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd read a while." Grace clutched her book protectively. "Please don't tell my stepfather." Noah's expression grew serious. "I would never do that." He gestured to her face where the yellowing bruise from her last punishment was still visible. "Did he do that to you? For reading?" Grace looked away. "He says women have no business with books, that it puts ideas in our heads and makes us forget our place." Noah's jaw tightened. "Your place is wherever you choose it to be, Miss Richards." He moved closer carefully, like one might approach a skittish colt. "How long have you been teaching yourself?" "Since I was little. My mama taught me some letters before she passed. I've been piecing together the rest." Grace opened her book, revealing the careful notes she'd made in the margins. "Sometimes I get stuck on words." Noah studied her notes with undisguised admiration. "You've done this all on your own. That's remarkable." For perhaps the first time in her life, Grace felt a flicker of pride in something beyond her cooking or cleaning skills. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." "Noah, please." He hesitated, then said quietly, "I could help you if you like. I was a schoolteacher back east before I came west." Grace's eyes widened. "A schoolteacher, but you're working as a ranch hand." Noah's laugh held a touch of self-deprecation. "Teaching doesn't pay well, and I had a notion to see the frontier. Thought I'd work the season, then maybe settle somewhere and start a proper school." His expression grew serious again. "I could teach you, Grace. Everything I know." She wanted to say yes immediately, but caution born from years of harsh lessons made her hesitate. "My stepfather will be careful," Noah promised. "Meet here late like this when everyone's asleep. You deserve the chance to learn." Grace looked down at the book in her hands, then back at Noah's earnest face. Something shifted inside her like a door long bolted suddenly creaking open. "Yes," she whispered, "I'd like that very much." Noah's smile lit up his entire face. "Then we'll begin tomorrow night. Bring your book, and I'll bring mine." That night marked the beginning of a dangerous secret between them. Each night when the house fell silent, Grace would slip downstairs to the kitchen where Noah waited. By candlelight, they bent over books together, his patient voice guiding her through difficult passages, teaching her not just to read but to understand. "Remember," Noah explained on their third night together, "reading isn't just about recognizing words. It's about understanding the meaning behind them." Grace nodded eagerly, absorbing every lesson. She was a quick study, her natural intelligence finally finding its outlet. Noah taught her reading, writing, arithmetic, and bits of science and history. But what fascinated her most were his stories of faraway places: New York, Boston, Philadelphia, cities where women could attend school, even college. "Some women become doctors now," Noah told her one night, 6 weeks into their lessons. "And writers. There's a whole world opening up, Grace." She tried to imagine such a life, such freedom, but it seemed as distant as the stars. Still, night after night, she risked her stepfather's wrath to learn. And night after night, she found herself watching Noah's face as he read, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hands moved expressively when he explained complex ideas. Their lessons became the center of her existence, the hours between merely time to endure until she could sit across from Noah again, absorbing knowledge like parched earth drinks rain. "You're the quickest student I've ever taught," Noah told her one evening as August heat gave way to September coolness. You have a natural gift. Grace flushed with pleasure. I have a good teacher. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, something neither was ready to name. Noah cleared his throat and returned to the lesson, but his fingers lingered when he passed her the pencil, and Grace felt the touch like a brand against her skin. They might have continued this way indefinitely, their feelings growing in the safety of their midnight lessons, if fate hadn't intervened one stormy October night. The lesson had run longer than usual. Noah was explaining the principles of astronomy, drawing diagrams of constellations that Grace found fascinating. Neither noticed the passing hours until a floorboard creaked overhead. "What's that light?" Edwin's voice boomed from the stairwell. "Who's down there?" Grace's blood ran cold. "Go," she whispered desperately to Noah. "The back door, quickly," but Noah hesitated, looking at her with concern. "I can't leave you, please," Grace begged. "He'll be worse if he finds us together." Reluctantly, Noah gathered his books and slipped toward the back door, but he wasn't fast enough. Edwin Tate's heavy footsteps reached the kitchen just as Noah was halfway across the room. "What in God's name is this?" Edwin roared, his face contorting with rage as he took in the scene book spread across the table, Grace with a pencil in hand, Noah frozen in the act of escape. "Mr. Tate," Noah began, stepping forward. "I can explain. Corrupting my stepdaughter, are you?" Edwin advanced, his fists clenching. "Teaching her to read when she should be learning her place." "Sir, there's no harm in education," Noah tried again. "No harm," Edwin laughed bitterly. "No harm in making a woman think she's equal to a man, in filling her head with nonsense instead of learning her duties." He turned his fury on Grace. "I warned you, girl. I warned you what would happen." He lunged toward her, hand raised, but Noah moved with surprising speed, placing himself between them. "Don't touch her," Noah said, his voice low and dangerous. "Ever again." Edwin's face purpled with rage. "This is my house. She's my responsibility. Get out, Cowboy, before I throw you out." "I'll go," Noah said calmly, "but Grace comes with me." The words hung in the air, startling both Grace and Edwin. Noah turned to her, his eyes intense. "Grace, come with me now, tonight." Edwin recovered first. "She's going nowhere. Grace, get upstairs this instant." Grace stood frozen between the two men, her heart pounding. To leave with Noah meant abandoning everything she'd ever known: safety, security, her home. To stay meant enduring Edwin's punishment and losing Noah forever. "Grace," Noah said softly, holding out his hand. "You deserve more than this. You deserve a chance at your own life." Edwin took a threatening step forward. "Girl, if you take his hand, don't ever think to come back to this house." Grace looked between them, the man who had controlled her life with fear for years, and the man who had shown her possibilities beyond her imagining. In that moment, she made her choice. She placed her hand in Noah's. Edwin howled with rage, lunging forward, but Noah pulled Grace toward the door. "Run!" he shouted, and they fled into the night, the storm swallowing Edwin's curses behind them. Rain lashed at them as Noah led her to the stables behind the boarding house where his horse was kept. "Can you ride?" he shouted over the wind. Grace nodded, rain plastering her hair to her face. She'd learned as a child, though it had been years. Noah quickly saddled his stallion, a strong bay named Copper, and helped Grace mount before swinging up behind her. "Hold tight," he murmured, his arms encircling her as he took the reins. They galloped out of Lusk as lightning split the sky, heading west toward the foothills. Grace clung to the saddle horn, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Behind them, she could hear shouting. Edwin must have roused some of the townsmen. "Where are we going?" she called over her shoulder. "I have a friend," Noah answered, his voice close to her ear. "A rancher named Samuel Parker, about 15 miles west. He'll shelter us until we figure things out." They rode hard through the night, the storm gradually abating as they put distance between themselves and Lusk. Grace's thoughts tumbled over each other like leaves in a whirlwind. What had she done? Left everything, on the word of a man she'd known barely 2 months. Yet the alternative, returning to Edwin's control after tasting freedom, was unthinkable. Dawn was breaking when they reached the Parker Ranch, a modest spread nestled against the foothills. A weathered man with kind eyes greeted them at the door, taking in their rain-soaked appearance without comment. "Noah," he said simply. "Trouble?" "Sorry to bring it to your door, Sam," Noah replied, helping Grace down from the horse. Her legs nearly buckled after the long ride. Sam Parker ushered them inside, where his wife, Martha, a plump maternal woman, immediately set about getting them dry clothes and hot coffee. "Edwin Tate's stepdaughter," Noah explained quietly to Sam as Martha led Grace away to change. "He was going to beat her for learning to read. I couldn't leave her there." Sam's expression darkened. Tate's had that coming for years, the way he treated that girl's mother before she died. He shook his head. "You did right, Noah, but he won't let this go easily." "I know," Noah sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "We need to get farther away. I was thinking Denver maybe, or even California." "First, you both need rest," Sam insisted. "Stay a few days. Tate might raise a fuss in town, but no one's going to ride out here looking for you. At least not right away." When Grace returned wearing a simple dress borrowed from Martha, color had returned to her cheeks. She accepted a mug of coffee gratefully, her hand still trembling slightly. "Thank you for taking us in, Mr. Parker," she said. Sam waved away her thanks. "Any friend of Noah's is welcome here, and any enemy of Edwin Tate's is a friend of mine." Martha showed them to separate rooms where they could rest. Exhausted from the night's events, Grace fell into a deep sleep despite the turmoil in her mind. She woke in the late afternoon to find the household going about its business as if harboring fugitives was an everyday occurrence. Martha had enlisted her help with dinner preparations, and Grace was grateful for the familiar task to occupy her hands while her thoughts raced. Noah spent the day helping Sam with ranch chores, returning to the house at dusk, his face wind-burned but his eyes seeking Grace the moment he entered. The relief on his face when he saw her was palpable, as if he'd feared she might have disappeared. After dinner, when Sam and Martha had retired to their room, Noah and Grace sat before the fire in the small parlor. "I'm sorry," Noah said finally, breaking the silence between them. "I didn't mean to upend your life like this." Grace studied the dancing flames. "You didn't force me to take your hand, Noah. I chose to. Still, I've put you in a difficult position, a woman alone traveling with a man she barely knows." He hesitated. "People will talk." "People always talk," Grace replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "And I know you better than you think." Noah's eyes met hers across the space between them. "What do you mean? I know you're patient and kind. I know you believe people should be free to learn, regardless of their station or sex. I know you love poetry and history and that your favorite constellation is Orion." She took a deep breath. "I know enough to trust you, Noah Lawson." A smile slowly spread across his face, warming his eyes. "And I know you're braver than anyone I've ever met, Grace Richards." They sat in companionable silence after that, watching the fire burn down to embers, the unspoken growing between them like a living thing. The next morning brought unwelcome news. A ranch hand returning from town reported that Edwin Tate had indeed raised a commotion, accusing Noah of kidnapping his stepdaughter. A few men, mostly those who owed Edwin debts or favors, had formed a search party. "You should leave tomorrow," Sam advised over breakfast. "Head south instead of west. They'll expect you to go toward Cheyenne or Laramie. I have a brother in Colorado Springs who can help you." Noah nodded grimly. We'll leave at first light. That day passed in preparations. Martha packed food and supplies while Sam provided a second horse for Grace, a gentle mare named Daisy. Noah pored over maps with Sam, planning their route to avoid main roads and settlements. Grace found herself both terrified and strangely calm. The die was cast. There was no going back to her old life. Whatever lay ahead, at least she had chosen it freely. That evening, as she helped Martha with mending, the older woman suddenly took her hand. "You love him, don't you?" Martha asked gently, Grace startled. I barely know him." Martha's knowing smile was kind. Sometimes the heart knows faster than the mind is willing to admit. She squeezed Grace's hand. "Noah is a good man, one of the best I've known. Whatever happens, remember that." Later, alone in her borrowed room, Grace contemplated Martha's words. Did she love Noah? The thought both frightened and thrilled her. She had never allowed herself to imagine love, marriage, a family of her own. Those dreams seemed reserved for other women, women whose lives weren't controlled by men like Edwin Tate. But now, possibility stretched before her like an open road. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Dawn came too quickly. Grace dressed in clothes Martha had altered for riding, a split skirt and sturdy blouse, and tied her hair back with a ribbon. When she emerged from her room, Noah was waiting in the kitchen, looking as nervous as she felt. "Ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to find words. They said their goodbyes to the Parkers, promises to write once they were settled somewhere safe, and mounted their horses. The October morning was crisp and clear, the sky a perfect blue that seemed to stretch forever. "Stay off the main trails," Sam reminded them. "Follow the creek south for 10 miles, then cut east toward the ridge. You should reach Ben's place in 3 days if the weather holds." Noah reached across the space between their horses to briefly clasp Sam's hand. "I won't forget this. Just live well," Sam replied. "Both of you." With one last look at the ranch that had sheltered them, Noah and Grace rode out, heading toward the distant horizon and whatever future awaited them. The first day of travel passed uneventfully. They kept a steady pace, Noah frequently checking their surroundings for signs of pursuit. Grace, who had rarely ventured beyond Lusk in her life, marveled at the vastness of the landscape, rolling prairies giving way to pine-covered foothills, rocky outcroppings rising like sentinels against the sky. They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, Noah building a small fire that wouldn't be visible from a distance. As they shared the bread and dried beef Martha had packed, an awkward silence fell between them. "Noah," Grace finally said, gathering her courage. "What happens when we reach Colorado Springs?" He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing upward. "I have some savings, enough to get us further west if needed, California maybe, or Oregon." "Us?" Grace asked quietly. Noah looked up, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I mean, I assumed." He ran a hand through his hair. "Grace, I would never presume to. That is, you're free to go your own way once we're safe. I didn't help you escape one man's control just to impose my own." The sincerity in his voice made something warm unfurl in Grace's chest. "And if I choose to stay with you," Noah's expression softened, "then I would be the happiest man in the territory." She smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "Good, because I'm not sure I'm ready to face the world alone just yet." He reached across the space between them, hesitantly taking her hand. "You won't have to, not unless you want to." They slept that night on opposite sides of the fire, but Grace fell asleep watching the steady rise and fall of Noah's chest, finding comfort in his presence. The second day brought clouds and cooler temperatures. They followed Sam's directions, staying away from trails and settlements, though the going was slower over rough terrain. By midday, rain threatened, and they sought shelter beneath a rocky overhang as fat droplets began to fall. Huddled together, watching the rain create a curtain around their shelter, Grace found herself studying Noah's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Why did you really leave teaching?" she asked suddenly. Noah glanced at her, surprised by the question. "What makes you think there was another reason? The way you talk about it, like you're missing something you loved." He sighed, his gaze returning to the rain. "There was a school board member's daughter. She took a fancy to me, I suppose. Made advances that I rejected. Her father accused me of impropriety." His jaw tightened. "It was my word against theirs, and they were a prominent family." "That's terrible," Grace said, indignation rising on his behalf. Noah shrugged, but she could see the old hurt in his eyes. "It happens. Men in positions of power protecting their interests. I decided a fresh start somewhere new was better than fighting a battle I couldn't win." Grace understood then why he had been so quick to intervene with Edwin, why he had risked everything to help her escape. He knew what it was to be powerless against injustice. Impulsively, she reached for his hand. "Thank you for everything." His fingers tightened around hers. "You don't need to thank me, Grace. If anything, I should thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me why I became a teacher in the first place. Seeing your face when you understand something new, it's like watching the sun rise." The rain continued to fall around them, but Grace barely noticed, lost in the warmth of Noah's gaze and the gentle pressure of his hand holding hers. When the storm passed, they continued south, making good time despite the muddy ground. That night they camped in a stand of pines, and Noah resumed their lessons, using a stick to draw letters in the dirt. "Even on the run, education continues," he said with a smile that made Grace's heart flutter. She was a different student now, more confident, asking questions freely, challenging ideas in a way she never would have dared before. And Noah responded with delight to her intellectual curiosity, their discussions ranging far beyond basic reading lessons to philosophy, politics, and dreams of the future. "I want to see the ocean someday," Grace confessed as they lay looking up at the stars. "Is it really as vast as they say?" "Vaster," Noah replied. "It stretches to the horizon in every direction, and the waves never stop moving. The first time I saw it, I felt very small, but in a good way, like being reminded that the world is so much bigger than our troubles. Will you take me there?" The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. In the darkness, she felt rather than saw Noah turn toward her. "Yes," he said simply. "If that's what you want." The promise hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. The third day dawned bright and cold. According to Sam's directions, they should reach his brother's ranch by nightfall if they maintained a steady pace. They rode mostly in companionable silence, both aware that their journey together was approaching a crossroads. Around midday, as they crested a hill, Noah suddenly reined in his horse, his posture alert. "What is it?" Grace asked, immediately concerned. Noah pointed to a plume of dust in the distance, moving in their direction. "Riders, could be nothing, but we shouldn't take chances." They turned east, pushing their horses harder, seeking the cover of a wooded area visible in the distance. Grace's heart pounded with fear. Had Edwin's search party somehow found their trail? They reached the trees and dismounted, leading their horses deeper into the cover. Noah's expression was grim as he helped Grace down from her mare. "Stay here with the horses," he instructed. "I'll go back and see who they are." "Be careful," Grace whispered, suddenly afraid to let him out of her sight. Noah hesitated, then in a swift motion, leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a brief, tender kiss that was over almost before it began. "For luck," he murmured. then slipped away through the trees before she could respond. Grace touched her fingers to her lips, her mind reeling from the unexpected kiss. Despite the danger, she couldn't suppress the smile that spread across her face. Noah returned 15 minutes later, relief evident in his expression. "Just some cowboys moving cattle, nothing to do with us." They continued their journey, but something had shifted between them. Their eyes met more frequently. Their hands found reasons to touch when passing water or helping each other over difficult terrain. The kiss remained unmentioned, but ever present in the charged air around them. Late afternoon brought them within sight of their destination, a sprawling ranch nestled in a verdant valley. Smoke curled from the chimney of the main house, and cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. "We made it," Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. Grace reached across the space between their horses, taking his hand. "Together." The word held a promise that made Noah's eyes darken. He squeezed her fingers gently before releasing them to lead the way down to the ranch. Benjamin Parker proved to be as welcoming as his brother, though more taciturn. His wife Sophia, however, embraced Grace like a long-lost daughter. "Any friend of Sam and Martha's is family here," she declared, ushering them inside where a hot meal awaited. Over dinner, Noah explained their situation. Ben listened grimly, occasionally nodding. "You're welcome to stay as long as needed," he said finally. "I've got work if you want it, Noah, and I reckon Mrs. Parker could use help with the house and the children." Sophia enthusiastically agreed. "Our youngest just started school, and I've been saying for years I need an extra pair of hands around here." Grace and Noah exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. This could be a safe haven, at least for a while. They were shown to separate rooms again, though this time in a small cabin adjacent to the main house that Ben explained was usually reserved for visiting relatives. "Thought you might appreciate a bit of privacy," he said gruffly, leaving them at the cabin door. Alone in the small common room that separated their bedrooms, Noah and Grace stood awkwardly, the events of the past days suddenly catching up to them. "We should get some rest," Noah finally said. "It's been a long journey." Grace nodded, though sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. "Noah," she began, then hesitated. He waited, his eyes gentle. "Yes, thank you, not just for helping me escape, but for—" She struggled to find the right words. "For seeing something in me worth saving." Noah stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite tenderness. "I didn't save you, Grace. You saved yourself the moment you decided to learn to raid, to reach for something more than what was expected of you." His thumbs brushed her cheeks. "I just had the privilege of witnessing your courage." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them, the look in Noah's eyes took her breath away. Admiration, yes, but something deeper, something that made her heart race. "Noah," she whispered, and it was both a question and an answer. His kiss this time was not brief. It was a revelation, gentle at first, then deepening as Grace responded with all the emotions she'd been holding at bay. Her arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer, while his hands slipped to her waist, steadying her as the world seemed to spin around them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Noah rested his forehead against hers. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the first night I caught you reading by candlelight," he confessed. Grace's heart soared at his words. "And I think I've been falling in love with you since you offered to teach me everything you know." Noah's smile was radiant. "That offer still stands, you know, though I suspect you'll soon surpass your teacher." "Never," Grace said softly, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him again. "There will always be more for you to teach me." They retired to their separate rooms that night, but the barrier between them had dissolved. replaced by the promise of a future neither had dared imagine before. The days at the Parker Ranch quickly settled into a comfortable routine. Noah worked alongside Ben with the cattle, while Grace helped Sophia with household management and cared for their youngest children when they returned from the small schoolhouse 5 miles away. Noah continued Grace's education in the evenings, their lessons now punctuated with kisses and increasingly meaningful glances. They were careful to maintain propriety. The Parkers were kind but traditional people, but it was clear to everyone that something special was growing between them. A month passed, then two. Winter settled over the Colorado landscape, transforming the ranch into a wonderland of snow and ice. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere that Grace had never experienced before. Edwin had never allowed celebrations, deeming them frivolous. "Have you ever had a proper Christmas?" Noah asked one evening as they sat by the fire in their cabin after returning from dinner with the Parkers. Grace shook her head. "My mother used to tell me stories about Christmas when I was very small, but after she married Edwin," she shrugged. "He said it was a waste of time and money." Noah's expression hardened briefly at the mention of Edwin, but then softened as he took her hand. "Then this year will be your first real Christmas." In the days that followed, Noah disappeared on mysterious errands, returning with secretive smiles that both frustrated and delighted Grace. The Parkers were clearly in on whatever he was planning, exchanging knowing glances whenever the subject of Christmas arose. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner with the Parker family, Noah asked Grace to take a walk with him despite the cold. Bundled in warm clothes borrowed from Sophia, they strolled through the snow-covered landscape, the moon casting a silvery glow over everything. "Are you happy here, Grace?" Noah asked suddenly. She considered the question seriously. "Yes, the Parkers are wonderful and the work is satisfying." She squeezed his gloved hand. "And I'm with you, that's the most important part." Noah's expression grew serious. "What if we could have something more permanent? Something that's truly ours?" Grace's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" He led her to a rise overlooking the ranch, where a large pine tree stood sentinel against the night sky. To Grace's astonishment, someone had hung small lanterns from its branches, creating a magical glow in the darkness. "Noah," she breathed, "it's beautiful." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Grace Richards, when I met you, I was a man adrift, running from my past and uncertain of my future." His voice was husky with emotion. "You gave me purpose again. You reminded me why teaching matters, because education can free a person's mind and spirit." Grace felt tears welling in her eyes as Noah continued. "These past months have been the happiest of my life, despite the circumstances that brought us together. I know we haven't known each other long, but sometimes—" He smiled. "Sometimes the heart knows faster than the mind is willing to admit." Grace recognized Martha's words from months ago and wondered if Noah had heard them too, or if the sentiment had simply found its way to both of them. Noah released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that glinted in the lantern light, a simple gold band. "The town nearest the ranch has need of a schoolteacher," he said softly. "Ben mentioned it to me last week. They've offered me the position starting in the spring." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to accept it, Grace, but only if you'll be by my side, as my wife." Grace's tears spilled over, tracking warm paths down her cold cheeks. "Noah, I promise to love you every day of my life," he continued earnestly, "to support your dreams as you've supported mine, to always see you as my equal and partner in all things." His eyes searched hers. "Will you marry me, Grace?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes. Yes, Noah, I will marry you." His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms, spinning her around in the snow until they were both laughing and breathless. When he set her down, his kiss was a promise, a beginning, a future stretching before them filled with possibilities neither had dared dream of before finding each other. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the Parkers' front parlor, with Ben performing the ceremony as justice of the peace. Sophia had altered one of her best dresses for Grace, adding lace at the collar and cuffs. Noah wore a new shirt and his cleanest trousers, his hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving Grace's face as they spoke their vows. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Ben declared, his usual gruffness softened by the occasion. "You may kiss your bride, Professor." Noah's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. Grace felt something settle in her soul, a sense of rightness, of having finally found her place in the world. The small celebration afterward was the happiest occasion of Grace's life. The Parker children had decorated the house with pine boughs and ribbons, and Sophia had baked a special cake. There was music from Ben's fiddle, dancing, and more laughter than Grace had experienced in all her previous years combined. Late that night, when they retired to their cabin now shared as husband and wife, Noah presented Grace with one final surprise. A small, leather-bound book. "Your wedding gift," he said, watching nervously as she opened it. Inside, Grace found blank pages, dozens of them, with a message inscribed on the first page in Noah's neat handwriting. "For Grace Lawson, whose story is just beginning. May these pages hold the dreams, thoughts, and wisdom that have always been within you, waiting for the chance to emerge. All my love, Noah." Tears filled Grace's eyes as she looked up at her husband. "A journal," Noah nodded. "I thought perhaps someday you might want to write your own stories, not just read others. You have a gift with words, Grace." She ran her fingers reverently over the blank pages, imagining them filled with her thoughts, her experiences, perhaps even tales for others to read someday. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." That night, as snow fell softly outside their window, Noah and Grace discovered a new kind of intimacy, one built on trust, love, and mutual respect. In Noah's tender embrace, Grace found answers to questions she hadn't known to ask, and a passion that matched the fire of her intellect. Spring came to Colorado, bringing with it new beginnings. Noah began his position at the small schoolhouse in the nearby town of Fairview, while Grace set about making their new home, a modest cottage provided by the town, into a warm and welcoming haven. To her surprise, when the school board learned of Grace's own education, carefully edited to omit the circumstances of her flight from Wyoming, they offered her a position teaching the youngest children. It was unusual for a married woman to teach, but the remote community was practical enough to recognize the value of two educated people willing to settle in their midst. "Are you sure about this?" Noah asked when she told him of the offer. "Teaching alongside me would mean less time for our home, for starting a family." Grace's response was decisive. "I want both, Noah. A family, yes, but also the chance to help other children discover the joy of learning that you showed me." She took his hands. "You taught me that I could be more than what others expected of me. Now I want to pass that lesson on." Noah's proud smile was all the answer she needed. Their life together settled into a rhythm of shared work and shared dreams. During the day, they taught at the small schoolhouse, Noah with the older students, Grace with the beginners. Evenings were spent planning lessons, reading together by the fire, and exploring the passion that continued to deepen between them. Their reputation in Fairview grew as dedicated educators who genuinely cared for their students. Parents noted the improvement in their children's knowledge and confidence. The school board, initially skeptical about employing a husband and wife team, became their strongest advocates. In the summer of 1880, as their first anniversary as teachers approached, Grace made an important discovery. The nausea that had been troubling her in the mornings wasn't from something she'd eaten, as she'd initially thought. She waited until a quiet evening when they were sitting on the porch of their cottage, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. "Noah," she said, her voice slightly trembling with excitement, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, immediately attentive. "What is it, love? We're going to have a baby in the winter." Noah's expression transformed from surprise to wonder to absolute joy in the span of seconds. He knelt before her chair, gathering her hands in his. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with awe. "Grace, that's wonderful." Her own joy reflected in his eyes multiplied. "You're happy then?" Happy doesn't begin to describe it. He pressed his lips to her still flat stomach, then looked up at her with such love that Grace felt her heart might burst. "Our child will have every opportunity, every advantage we can provide. And most of all, they'll be loved, so very loved." Grace ran her fingers through his hair, thinking of how far she had come from that frightened young woman in Lusk who had hidden books beneath floorboards. "Our child will never have to learn in secret," she vowed. "They'll grow up knowing that knowledge is their birthright." Noah rose to sit beside her, gathering her close. "And they'll have the most extraordinary mother to guide them." The months of Grace's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The community rallied around them, with women bringing quilts and baby clothes, men helping Noah add a nursery to their cottage. Sophia Parker made the journey from the ranch to stay with Grace during her final month, bringing practical advice and maternal comfort. On a snowy evening in January 1881, after hours of labor, Grace gave birth to a healthy boy with Noah's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair. They named him Samuel William Lawson Samuel for the Parker brothers who had helped them find safety, and William for Grace's father, who had died when she was a child. "Hello, Samuel," Noah whispered, cradling his son with tears in his eyes. "Welcome to the world. Your mama and I have been waiting for you." Grace watched her husband and son, exhausted but filled with a happiness so complete it seemed almost too much for her heart to contain. This was her family created through love, choice, and courage. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, Grace continued teaching, bringing him to school with her. The sight of Mrs. Lawson instructing her pupils with a baby on her hip became a familiar one in Fairview, challenging conventional notions of a woman's role while demonstrating that motherhood and profession could coexist. In the spring of 1883, a letter arrived that changed their peaceful existence. It was from Martha Parker, containing news that Edwin Tate had died of pneumonia during the harsh winter. "The boarding house has been sitting empty," Martha wrote. "According to Sam's inquiries, as Edwin's only living relative, Grace is his legal heir. The property is hers if she wants it." Grace and Noah discussed the unexpected inheritance long into the night. The boarding house represented painful memories, but also opportunity. "We could sell it," Noah suggested. "Use the money to build a proper school here." But Grace had another idea forming. "What if we returned to Lusk? Not to live there, but to transform the boarding house into something else. Something that would have horrified Edwin." "Like what?" Noah asked, intrigued by the spark in his wife's eyes. "A library," Grace said firmly. "And perhaps a small school for girls and women who never had the chance to learn." Noah's slow smile showed his appreciation of the poetic justice in her plan. Edwin Tate's boarding house becoming a place of education for women. I think that's the most fitting memorial I can imagine." That summer, leaving Samuel with the Parkers, they made the journey back to Lusk the first time either had returned since their dramatic flight years earlier. The town had grown somewhat, but the boarding house stood much as they remembered it, though showing signs of neglect. As they stood before the building, Grace felt the weight of memories both painful and precious. This was where Edwin had struck her for daring to read. It was also where she had first met Noah, where he had promised to teach her everything he knew. "Are you all right?" Noah asked gently, his hand steady at the small of her back. Grace nodded, drawing strength from his presence. "Yes, this place no longer has power over me." They spent 2 weeks in Lusk, arranging for repairs to the boarding house and meeting with town officials about their plans to establish a library and school. To their surprise, they found support among many of the townspeople, particularly the younger generation who had chafed under old restrictions. "Times are changing," the new mayor told them over dinner at the hotel where they were staying. "Wyoming territory is moving toward women's suffrage. Your school would be well-timed." Before they left, Grace visited her mother's grave for the first time since her flight. She placed wildflowers on the simple marker and stood in silence for several minutes. "I wish you could have met Noah and Samuel," she said softly. "I wish you could see who I've become." The wind rustled through the graveyard's cottonwood trees, and Grace chose to believe it was her mother's response. They returned to Fairview with plans in place for the Tate Memorial Library and school for women to open the following year. A trusted local lawyer would oversee the renovations in their absence, with Martha Parker's cousin hired as the first librarian and instructor. Life resumed its pleasant rhythm, but with new purpose. Grace began writing educational materials specifically for adult women learning to read later in life, drawing on her own experience. Noah supported her efforts enthusiastically, offering suggestions and editing her work in the evenings. In the fall of 1884, as the library in Lusk prepared to open its doors, Grace discovered she was expecting their second child. Samuel, now 3 and full of curiosity about everything, was delighted at the prospect of becoming a big brother. "Will the baby know how to read right away?" he asked seriously, causing his parents to exchange amused glances. "No, sweetheart," Grace explained. "Babies have to learn everything just like you did, but you can help teach them when they're older." Samuel considered this responsibility solemnly. "I will be the best teacher, just like you and Papa." The following spring, Grace gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Martha Lawson. Unlike her brother's easy birth, Elizabeth's arrival was difficult, leaving Grace weak and feverish for days afterward. Noah cared for both children and his wife with tender devotion, his fear evident only in the fervent prayers he whispered when he thought Grace was sleeping. "Don't leave us," she heard him plead one night, his voice breaking. "We need you too much." "I'm not going anywhere," Grace promised, her voice weak but determined. "We have too much left to do together." True to her word, Grace recovered, though more slowly than after Samuel's birth. By the time Elizabeth was 6 months old, however, she was back to teaching part-time, with Noah's full support. That summer brought another milestone, the publication of Grace's first book, Learning Without Limits, a guide for women's education. Though modest in scope, the book found an audience among educators in Western territories where formal schooling was often limited, particularly for girls and women. "You're an author," Noah said proudly, holding the first printed copy as if it were made of gold. "Professor and Mrs. Lawson teaching the nation." Grace shook her head but couldn't suppress her smile. "Hardly the nation, but if it helps even a few women find their way to education." "It will," Noah assured her. just as you found your way against all odds. As the years passed, their family and their work continued to flourish. Samuel grew into a thoughtful, intelligent boy with his father's gift for explanation and his mother's determination. Elizabeth, nicknamed Libby, revealed herself to be artistic and free-spirited, always questioning conventional wisdom in ways that made her parents proud. The library in Lusk became a success beyond their expectations, eventually adding adult education classes for both women and men who had missed formal schooling. Grace visited twice yearly to oversee operations and teach special sessions, always returning to Fairview with a profound sense of having transformed her painful past into something meaningful. In 1889, 10 years after they had fled Lusk together, Noah received an offer to become principal of a larger school in Denver. The position came with housing on the school grounds and the opportunity for Grace to establish a women's educational program associated with the school. "What do you think?" Noah asked as they discussed the offer after the children were in bed. "It would be a significant change," Grace considered carefully. "The children are old enough for a move now. Samuel would have more educational opportunities in Denver and Libby too." She took Noah's hand. "And I think we're ready for a new challenge, don't you?" The decision was made. That summer they packed their belongings, said emotional farewells to their friends in Fairview, and moved to Denver. The city was a revelation to Grace, bustling, diverse, full of cultural opportunities she had only read about. Their new home, a handsome Victorian on the school grounds, seemed palatial after their cottage. Samuel and Libby adapted quickly to city life and their new school. Noah thrived in his position as principal, implementing progressive educational ideas that earned him respect among Denver's academic community. And Grace found her calling in developing educational programs for immigrant women and girls, teaching English alongside reading, writing, and practical skills. In the winter of 1890, as they prepared to celebrate Christmas in their Denver home, Noah surprised Grace with an unexpected gift: tickets for a journey the following summer. "To California," he explained, as she examined the train tickets with astonishment. "To see the ocean, just as I promised all those years ago." Grace's eyes filled with tears of joy. "You remembered." "I remember everything about those nights when we first started falling in love," Noah said softly. "Every dream you shared, every hope. And I intend to make them all come true if I can." The family's journey to California in the summer of 1891 became a highlight of their lives together. Samuel, 12 by then, kept a detailed journal of everything they saw. Libby, at 6, collected shells and stones from every stop along the way. And Grace, finally seeing the vast Pacific Ocean that had existed only in her imagination for so long, stood speechless on the shore, her hand tight in Noah's. "It's exactly as you described," she whispered as waves crashed against the sand. "So vast it makes our troubles seem small." Noah wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close as their children ran along the beach ahead of them. "We've come a long way from that kitchen in Lusk." Grace leaned her head against his shoulder, thinking of the frightened young woman she had been and the journey that had brought her here. "I never could have imagined this life." "You made it happen, Grace," Noah said, his voice warm with pride. "Your courage, your determination. I just had the good fortune to be part of your story." "Our story," she corrected, turning in his arms to kiss him, "and it's still being written." Indeed, their story continued to unfold in ways neither could have predicted. Grace's educational materials gained wider recognition, leading to speaking engagements throughout the western states. Noah's innovative approach to education, earned him an appointment to a territorial commission on educational standards. Their children grew and thrived, developing their own passions and dreams. As the 19th century drew to a close, Grace often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a forbidden book and a midnight encounter. From a young woman beaten for daring to learn, she had become an educator, author, and advocate whose work had touched countless lives. But of all her accomplishments, it was her family that gave her the deepest satisfaction, the love she shared with Noah that had only strengthened over the years, and the children they had raised to value knowledge, compassion, and courage. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, Noah presented Grace with a special gift, a new edition of Robinson Crusoe, bound in fine leather with gold lettering. "To replace the one you had to leave behind," he explained. Grace ran her fingers over the cover, remembering the worn copy she had hidden beneath the floorboards of Edwin's kitchen. "This journey began with a book," she said softly. "How fitting that we mark it with another." Noah took her hand, his touch still sending the same thrill through her after all these years. "What shall the next chapter of our story hold, Mrs. Lawson?" Grace smiled, thinking of all they had built together and all that still lay ahead. "Whatever it is," she replied, "we'll write it together." And they did, day by day, year by year, their love story continuing to unfold against the backdrop of a new century, a testament to the power of education, courage, and the enduring bond between two people who had found in each other not just love, but the freedom to become their truest selves.